Alrighty, thank you all so much for joining us today for our webinar with Uberall. Some housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be circulated to all attendees with the presentation within 24 hours of the broadcast. Questions will be answered during the Q&A session at the end. You can, however, ask questions at any time during the broadcast by using the question window in your control panel. My name is Dara. I am the social media coordinator for Localogy, and our speakers today are Brian Jambler and Alyssa Trenkup from Uberall. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to our analyst, Charles, and he will kick things off and get us started.
Thanks, Dara. Hello, everyone. I'm Charles Laughlin. I'm an analyst with Localogy. Thank you all for joining us. I'd say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on which part of the world you're joining us from. I'm really excited to be moderating this webinar today. My role is primarily to monitor Q&A. So if, as Dara just mentioned, there is a questions panel for you to type your questions. I really strongly encourage you, as you're listening and as questions occur to you, just add them to the questions, and at the appropriate time, I will read them so that our speakers can address them. And at the end, we will have a questions and answers section where if you haven't asked a question during the course of the webinar, you can ask it then. So I'm going to hand it over to Brian and Alyssa to get started. Thank you. Brian?
Great, thanks, Charles. And first of all, thank you for having us. We love Localogy and we love this community, so we're really excited to talk to everyone today, and hopefully the content we have today will be inspiring and engaging for you. So for Uberall, we love a theme. We love a good theme. So the theme we came up with today is David versus Goliath, and we all know the story of David versus Goliath, the big giant the little guy taking on the big giant, right? And so we love this theme because it almost doesn't matter if you're supporting clients that are small or big, there's always a weak point to exploit. If you're the big guy, how do you know what your weak points are, or how do you know how you stay ahead? And if you're the little guy, how do you really compete against the Goliaths of the world? And thankfully with technology, that's the great equalizer. So there's a lot of opportunity, whether you're supporting small businesses or large businesses, to really take all this thinking into account. So the reason we decided to go with this theme is because we recently came out with, or we recently did a study that measures the maturity of local digital marketing today. And this is a new study, so I'm just going to caveat that this actually isn't out there yet. This community is getting a first look at something brand new, so we're really excited to share this with you today, and we'll be happy to share the report when it comes out in the next week or two. But the thinking here is that, we just came out of something really big, a global pandemic that required businesses with physical locations to really think about how do they compete in this climate where customers aren't actually coming to their door as much or experiencing things in the real world, right? And they all doubled down on digital. And then as consumers, we all got accustomed to that, and our behaviors changed. We got comfortable with doing things digitally. So the bar had changed. The maturity model became different, right? What was highly mature, 2 years ago is so much different today. So it's a different picture. So we created this maturity model, and then we did a survey. We surveyed 459 location-based businesses with 26 or more locations. We asked them 13 questions that helped us get an indicator of their maturity. So things like, are you responding to reviews? Do you respond to negative reviews? Do you respond to all reviews? We asked them, do you have local pages? Are you, how are you managing those local pages with your corporate team or with your store manager? So just to give us a sense of where they're at today, really, and get a benchmark of where businesses are today and what maybe things they're missing. And that's what got us to today, which is this untapped opportunity. What we discovered and uncovered is that there's a lot of things businesses aren't actually doing today that if you're doing them, they could give you a leg up on the competition, really allow you to leapfrog a little bit. And also just knowing maybe what you're not doing that you should be doing just to stay in the pack, essentially, if you're thinking about it as a pack. So with that said, we wanted to share the maturity model. So this is the model we came up with. We think there's a lot of opportunity for our partners to think about how they add value along this spectrum. But in general, what we have here is 5 stages that define maturity. Stages 1 and 2 are really the early days. And this could be early days as in I'm a small business and or I'm supporting a small business and they're just getting started, building a web page. These are the foundational things you need as a launch point for a good local digital marketing strategy. You need a corporate website. You need to have a local social or a social presence in general as a business, and you need to have things like ads on a digital front. So these are the basic things that you need foundationally to actually jump off and build local marketing strategy. Then next is the basic local digital marketing. This is things like you're now thinking about your listings. Are you listed on Google Business Profile? Do you have some other listings you might think about based on your industry? Like if you're a lawyer, are you listed on some legal listing directories, things like that? And you're probably doing this all manually. You're not using a tool yet. So this is still basic local digital marketing. As we get into stage 3 and up, this is where things start to get more automated, more optimized, and more innovative. So stage 3 is where we're automating things like listings using a tool like Uberall or something else. You're automating your management of local social pages. You're thinking about Google Posts and review management, and you're probably doing this again in an automated way. And then optimized local marketing is where you're starting to think a little bit further ahead. Like you have optimized local web pages, you have a store locator to help people locate where your locations are. You might have some online conversion capabilities, things like booking appointments online or ordering ahead, chatbots, in-store digital. And then as we get into stage 5, this is really the stuff that maybe customers don't expect today, but can put you over the top in terms of delighting customers on their journey to your store. So this is things like online inventory. Do you have local online inventory? So me as a consumer knows what I want to buy is going to be available in stock when I get to the store. Menus, local community building, things like augmented reality and virtual reality. Again, probably not expected, but maybe it's a surprise and a delight to customers to be able to like see what that chair is going to look like in their office or something like that. So these are the extras, right? And this is a sliding scale. So as a business or as someone talking to a customer, where you're at might vary based on, are you doing a few things in stage 5? Maybe you're doing one thing there, but it's not enough to tip you into stage 5, right? You might not be enough to get there. So it's a sliding scale that can get you a little higher if you're doing a few of these things. So with that, we actually wanted to open up a poll and get a sense of where the listeners are today are at, because it will help us kind of understand where you guys are at and maybe tailor our talk track a little bit today to what might be interesting to you. So where do you think your clients are today when it comes to this stage of maturity? We'll give you a second to respond to that. And Brian, while they're doing that, any thoughts on the maturity model and anything to add there?
It's always interesting in looking at the maturity model and seeing exactly where businesses are at, especially based on the size of the organization and how they kind of fall into that. I think that the poll is going to be really interesting once we get everybody to take that, and then we can dive into some of the deeper data. But
Yeah, sounds good. So when Dara or whoever's managing the poll, when we're ready to reveal, we're all curious to know. Do we have the results we can show? There we go. Okay, what do you think, Brian? Is it surprised you? Is it kind of where you expected things to net out here?
I expected there's actually more heavy weight on basic than I thought there would be. I thought there'd probably be more given this audience and part of the broader Localogy community, right? It's really died into local. I expected the results to be maybe a slightly heavier skewed towards stage 3, but this is very interesting. It's very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's good. So why don't we show you a little bit of where, when we did the research, where people fell. So in general, the global average, and this is across, we did it in 5 countries, remember, so it's EMEA and the US, was right smack dab in the middle at 48%. When we looked at mid-sized businesses, it was actually a little higher, 49%, versus enterprise, which is a little lower. So I think it tells us that mid-sized businesses maybe are a little more agile, able to do some of these things a little faster, but we don't really know for sure. But that would be our hypothesis. So you guys are kind of right where the survey came out. So that's interesting. Any thoughts on that, Brian? Before we dive in?
I think it tells the tale that, you know, if you're a large organization, you have more resources up to a certain point, and then you start getting a little bit of sometimes bureaucracy, right, as you try to get things approved locally, right, to make sure that the brand is protected and the experience is consistent for customers. And so I think that this really tells that tale of the maturity that you have, right, up to a certain point until the agility that you have starts to diminish a little bit based on the size of the organization.
Yeah. And the good news is, I think in all of this, for those partners on the phone, is that there's so much room for opportunity, so much room to add value. So that's what we really want to dig into today and talk about a little bit more. So we've taken the David and Goliath, the slingshot, there's a rock or a pebble, whatever you want to call it. We decided to take this idea to the next level and talk about the big rocks that we need to think about as organizations to help build more maturity in our local digital marketing and strategy, and then also the pebbles. So some things that we can do to make that real today. So we're going to go ahead and dive in, and hopefully there's a lot of areas we can Brian will help support and talk about the areas we see partners can add value. So first big rock is listings. So obviously we have to talk about listings. Listings is a big thing. When it comes to local digital marketing, and listings are, I think a lot of people, once you have a listing, it's sit it and forget it. It's not right. We all know that in this industry that it's a lot more than that, and listings are always getting better. Things like Google Business Profile and Apple Maps, there's always room for improvement and always innovations happening that we can get a little better on. So there's a lot of opportunity here, and what we found is that a lot of businesses are still doing manual management of these. This is just one indicator of there's a lot of room for growth. But Brian's going to talk about big things that on the big daddy Google business profiles that businesses aren't taking advantage of. So I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Alyssa. Yeah, there's several areas here where we think that partners can really drive additional value for your clients. And if you're on this call and you're a brand, here's some things that you should be thinking about and focusing on yourself. So the first is making sure that all of your stores or locations have up-to-date holiday hours, right? This is a really great opportunity. Only 37% of businesses just aren't doing this, right? They don't have up-to-date holiday hours. We're going into the holiday season right now at the recording of this webinar, and so a great opportunity to either one, provide that as a service to your customers if you're a partner, or if you're a brand, make sure that your local locations have everything up to date going into the holidays. So that's a great opportunity to provide additional value. The second thing is managing Google Q&A, right? Critically important to making sure that those responses are timely, as far as the common questions that customers have around, your stores. Again, a really good, call it best practice, so to speak, that if you're a partner, you can provide to your customers in terms of counsel and content that you can create around that. If you're a brand, then you need to make sure that your local stores are empowered to do that and making sure that they maintain brand consistency. Same thing with being frequent with Google Posts. All of these things help you rise up in the SERPs, right? When you're doing those things consistently, and they set you apart from the competition. So again, from a partner standpoint, great content that you can put out around this, since 67% of brands just aren't doing this, right? So lots of opportunity there in terms of content and strategy and consultation that you can provide to your customers. And if you're a brand, you need to make sure your locations are able to do this, right? And then the last thing, actively managing Google Chat, right? Wide opportunity here, right? You see 72% of businesses just aren't doing this, right? Which means that if you do as a brand, you're really setting yourself apart. And if you're a partner, you should be coaching your customers that this is, again, another area that they can differentiate themselves from the competition.
Yeah, and when it comes to chat, you can automate some of it. There's AI tools out there to help you get the basic questions answered for your customers and reduce the friction, right? In the journey from going from online to hopefully ordering or coming to your store, right? Or your location.
Yeah, to your point, you can really minimize the overhead associated with a lot of those things. And sometimes when you're a smaller business, that's the concern, right? Time is the most valuable resource that anybody has, and it's even exponentially more so when you're a small business and you're wearing a lot of different hats if you're working with smaller locations. And so how do you really automate some of these things so that you can compete? And to your point, there are tools out there that allow you to do that at ease.
And Brian, like when you think about small businesses and any business for that matter, what is it that's holding them back from doing some of these things today? Do you think, if you had to guess based on?
Yeah, I honestly, I think it's twofold. I think that it's time, right? So small businesses, you're wearing typically a lot of hats, and depending on the size of the business, if you think about SMBs, the S in SMB, so really small businesses, they typically don't have a marketing department. They might have a marketing person that's responsible for all of their ads, right, that they're running both on a corporate level and at a local level, and they're maybe responsible for their social strategy, and they're responsible for, you know, some of the direction and content and utilizing tools to create all of that, right? And so it's some of it's lack of resources, right, and this concept of time. The second part is the adoption of technology. Sometimes, you know, you have, you know, small business owners that are really, really expert at whatever it is that they specialize in, but they're not technologists, right? And so they really rely on partners and SaaS companies to guide them through that process so that they can go and do these things that they know they should be doing, but they don't maybe necessarily know how to, or they don't know how to at scale.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's dive in, because just to be sensitive of time, rock number two. Rock number two is a focus on local social. And you'll see we got creative with the rocks, you guys. We like to make things fun and interesting. But this one I liked because it's like an iceberg a little bit. So it reminds me of like that when it comes to local social, we're only covering the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to unearth here and add value, it feels like, with only 34% of multi-location businesses actually having some sort of local social strategy. So there's so much room for improvement. So I'll let you, Brian, talk a little bit about where you think the value add can be here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a massive opportunity here in terms of responding to social comments and providing a social starting point for social posting. I think a lot of times brands get hung up on the what do I post locally, right? Where do I start? And so providing templates and framework for that. There are great platforms that give you, you know, templates and the ability to have kind of starters, so to speak, in terms of that content strategy that helps your local team immediately go to market in terms of engaging locally via social.
And then on this one, I just want to ask a follow-up question, because I think one of the things that holds people back is a little bit of like, if I have more than one location and I'm giving ownership of social over to someone, I'm worried about my brand. How can you combat that, or how can you help them, like, ease them out of that fear of brand control a little bit, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's where you have to, of course, have the policy in place. The policy is important, but to back up that policy, you need structure or framework or software that can provide guidance, right? So what's the content library of pre-approved images that we can already use, right? What is the, you know, keywords or phrases or things that we really want to focus on in terms of holidays or upcoming local events, right? What's the calendar that we have pre-approved in terms of upcoming events and how we want to really market locally around those. And so you can provide structure with software, right? In addition to that, you need the policy to back it up. But software, I think, is the key to do it really effectively.
Good stuff. Okay, so rock number three, no surprise, review response is a huge opportunity. So only 41% of multi-location businesses, or 41% of multi-location businesses don't respond to reviews frequently enough. So almost half, right? That's a huge number. And we know that there's a couple things to point out here. The first thing is, as a consumer, when I don't get a review response, I feel pretty bad. You know, like I've had this happen to me before. I'm sure many of us, all of us have had this happen to us. You spend all this time to write a nice review, and you await the response from the business because you think, you know, you matter to them and you want to matter to them, and they don't respond, and you feel a little bummed out about it. Like, we've all had this experience. But the other thing about it is we also know responding to reviews really matters for rank in local search. So we know it's a huge factor when it comes to Google and other platforms. So it's really important from that perspective too. So there's so much opportunity here for both, you know, loyalty, driving conversions because there's more reviews and better reviews and responses from the business. It just shows they care about their customers, and then also discoverability and being found. So there's a lot of reasons this is a big one, and I know there's a lot of value our partners can add here. So Brian, do you want to talk a little bit about this one?
Yeah, absolutely. But before I do, I think it might be fun for any of you that have ever been ghosted before, right? Where you sent a text or a message or an email to somebody and they just didn't respond. You were engaging with them previously, and the next thing you know, poof, they're gone. Type in ghosted in the chat box. You know, I think it'd be really interesting to see who's been ghosted before. I think many of us have. And how does that feel? How do you feel when that happens? You feel horrible typically, right? I know I don't feel great when.
Hey, Brian, this is Charles. Is there an automated response to the word ghosted programmed into these chatbots?
Is there an automated response?
Does that trigger an automated response?
Yeah, I mean, well, that's the question, right? Actually, it's a great question, Charles. Would you rather be ghosted, or would you rather get an automated response saying, "Hey, I appreciate you"?
To the word ghosted, yeah.
like that's the question, right? I think that customers value engagement, and I think just people in general value engagement, right? It's like that human to human marketing is so critical in terms of how you engage with customers. And so if you have a no text review, it's a single star review, should you respond to it? Yes, you should still respond to it, right? If it's a negative review, should you still respond to it? Of course you should. Some engagement is better than no engagement. You should be leading the narrative, right, for your brand, and don't rely on your maybe customers to lead the narrative, right? Really take ownership of that. And the benefit of all of that is you get additional SEO benefit from Google when you do that effectively, right? I think that from a partnership standpoint, there's a way that partners can enable this for their customers automatically, right? To a degree, right? Which like actually truly works and doesn't feel like, oh, this is just an automated response and it doesn't ever vary. And like, we've gotten very sophisticated in terms of, how you can do these things programmatically. I think the other thing is just coaching and a little bit of consulting in terms of best practices around this.
Yeah, I'm just very curious about this notion of no text reviews. Could you dig in a little more on what some best practices are and how to efficiently and effectively respond to a no text review? Because I don't think most people who just click on a star are expecting any response. Am I wrong in assuming that, or is that about right?
I think you're right. I think that the average consumer, if they don't leave a review and they just, it's a no text review, that they don't expect a response. But the question that I always have is, are you trying to be like every other brand, or are you trying to surprise and delight? So the surprise and delight strategy would be responding, right? You're doing something that's atypical that your competitors aren't doing, and that really has you stand out in terms of working with the customers as far as your brand relations is concerned. The way that you can do that programmatically is through software. Software allows you to programmatically kind of queue those up and say, hey, anytime we have a no text review, here's the 5 to 10 different responses that we want to automatically respond, choose one at random and respond to one of those, right? And so you can vary the response, and so it doesn't feel completely impersonal. And at the same time, it shows that you really care about the customer, even if they only leave you a review without a text or commentary behind it.
Does it matter if it's a 1-star or a 5-star? Is it equally important across the spectrum of no text reviews?
Absolutely. I would almost say that it's more important on 1-star reviews than it is on 5-star reviews.
Mm-hmm.
You want to own the narrative, right? You want to show that you care. I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a site and I see a 1-star review and I see the brand come back and say, hey, I'm sorry that you had a bad experience. We would love to, reconcile that, rectify the experience, and it's really important to us that all of our customers have a great experience. Reach out to us at this email address, and we'd love to talk about it and see what we can do to make your experience better, right? When I see that as a consumer, it makes me, even though it's a 1-star review, it makes me confident that I can work with that brand, because if I have an issue, I feel like I'm going to have some sort of resolution to that, right? There's a resolution path, as opposed to leaving a 1-star review because I'm upset as a consumer because of maybe a bad experience for whatever reason, and it goes into the ether, and then I never hear from the brand again, and what does that do? That drives a bunch of negative sentiment if anybody asks me about it, right? How's your experience with this brand? Oh, I had this experience and it was horrible, right? I'm now owning the narrative for that brand. But if you switch that around, then the brand can own the narrative, at least publicly, and say, no, we take care of our customers, and here's why and here's how.
The other thing I'd add here is that we know that obviously responding to reviews helps with ranking, right? So we also know that about 50% of reviews these days are just a star rating and no comment. So if you can all of a sudden respond to 50% more reviews, and it's fairly easy, and this is a great place for automation, it can really boost your rank level. It's a good thing to do for customers, obviously, as Brian points out, but it's another reason to do it.
And it has risen as a ranking factor in recent years, that correct? Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, we don't know for sure the whole algorithm, but
Right.
Yes, based on experimental.
Widely perceived to have risen in importance.
Yes, exactly.
Does it have a positive impact? Yes.
Right.
Absolutely. And again, if you're a partner, this is a service that you can offer to your customers, right? You say, hey, we can automate this for you so that you can do it at scale, right? So that this will save your team time, whether it be if you're a small business, save you time, or if you've got a larger brand, this will save your team time, right? And allow you to do it, again, at scale. I think that's a really important factor too.
Cool. Well, I think we love the review topic. It's clear. So our next one here, rock number 4, is incentivizing return purchases. And here, I mean, intuitively, we all know that it's less expensive to keep an existing customer than acquire a new one. So we know that there needs to be a little of both, right? You need to acquire new customers, but keeping those ones that are loyal to you is really, really important. And the cost, there's many stats out there that say, oh, it's 5 times less expensive or whatever it might be. It could vary from industry to industry, but we know there is a value to retaining your customers that love you, right? So let's talk a little bit about.
Well, could I just interject a quick question there? Now, we've all heard this over the years. It's sort of axiomatic that it's easier to to retain an existing customer than to acquire a new one. The ratio we can leave aside. Why do you think this is so important, and has its importance risen or declined over the years in your sense? And why don't more businesses more consistently emphasize retention over acquisition?
Yeah, I think I mean, it's like most interesting questions, it's a complex factor of things, right? I think that just to address the number, I've heard anywhere from 5% to 13 to 20+%, right? Again, as Alyssa put, it depends on the industry and what you're doing. I think that the focus on new acquisition as opposed to retaining existing customers as a focus for most companies is in large part due to the fact that it's relatively hard to really double down on surprise and delight and making things easy for your existing customers. It requires product, it requires your customer success team, it requires a lot of concentrated strategy around that. As opposed to landing new customers, you can solve that with bodies typically, right? I'm going to add a bunch of bodies in sales and marketing will generate pipeline and we can solve that, right? And so I think that it's a tough challenge. The other thing that is interesting is I recently read an article on Forbes where they were talking about in today's day and age, it is less expensive to retain a customer. This has been common knowledge for a long time, but the question is, do you focus more on that or new customers? And when, and here's the caveat, when a new customer that might be larger could generate more revenue for you than an existing customer, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that the key to all of this is balance. You have to balance your efforts in new customer acquisition with your efforts in revenue retention. And I think that is, nobody wants to talk about the big elephant in the room, but when you're in an economic climate that is receding, retention becomes even stronger, strategic priority, or can be, right? Because your new customer acquisition could potentially slow down due to external economic factors that may relatively be out of your control. And so I think it's, again, important to think about these things holistically as a business, as opposed to myopically or singularly.
Okay.
So we have four different missed opportunities here that, in regards to this, I think what's interesting is 62% of companies don't have a customer loyalty program. We were kind of talking about this internally. So why do we think that's so high? And I think that's because it can be complex if you make it, right? But it doesn't have to be, right? I have a brand that I really like that creates blue jeans and dress pants, right? And I've bought probably way too many pairs of jeans from them. And once I reached a certain amount of spend with them, they sent me a water bottle that had their logo on it. That cost them relatively nothing, but as a loyal customer, they included that as a gift, surprise and delight, without me being aware of it, all right? Just as a benefit of buying so much volume from them. And again, something simple, it didn't have to be overly complex, but that really made an impact because I wasn't expecting it, right? So again, customer loyalty programs can be simple or simplistic, but still have a significant impact on your customer base. And these are things that if you're a partner, you can teach to your customers, and you can walk them through kind of best practices of this. Another great thing is sentiment analysis. Most companies don't utilize sentiment analysis to structure customer feedback. And the question is why? Because if you don't have software that allows you to do that at scale, it's really hard. It's really, really hard to manually go in and pick out all the keywords and form some sort of sentiment around each comment and feedback, and then provide consistent experience to customers based on that, right? Structuring customer feedback based on that sentiment analysis. But there are great platforms. I'll selfishly do a plug for Uberall. Great platforms that give you the opportunity to do that, right? Very easily and at scale, right? So if you're not doing that, you can. It's a question of how do you do that at scale, and the key is software. Referral programs, similarly, I think that those things can be complex if you want them to be, right? But with software and a little bit of structure, they can be extremely easy to do. But I think most people don't do them because of the complexity of quote unquote making it perfect, right? Oh, okay, I have to have all the collateral for my referral, partners or customers that refer business to me, and I have to have some sort of way for them to generate affiliate codes, and I have to have a maybe some sort of registration process or something. It doesn't have to be nearly that complex. You can start simple and then scale from there. And then displaying reviews on website. Again, I think this gets back to the programmatability of the ease of being able to do that, right? And if you're a small business, that may seem really daunting, right? If you're a larger business, maybe it's simple at the corporate level, but at the local level, filtering out those reviews at the local level maybe seem complex. But again, there are platforms you can utilize to do this. If you're a partner, you can offer this as a service to your customers and do that programmatically through software. If you're a brand, you can do this at scale, utilizing the right platform as well. So again, I think there are degrees to this, but a lot of it is you can start simple. It doesn't have to be overly complex. And then if you use the right programs in place, you can do it with ease.
Yeah,
I have a quick question. I'm sorry. It's probably been talked about a lot, but the importance of displaying all reviews versus just the good ones. How do you talk about that with customers?
Yeah, I think that there's especially in the last several years been a really strong emphasis placed with consumers to brands on transparency. All right, there's this really deep desire that I think the public has on knowing, okay, what's the truth? What can I who can I really trust? Right? And I'll tell you right now that if I as a consumer go onto a site and all I see are 4 and 5 star reviews, my instinct is that they're not telling the full story, right? What's the full story? And so I think that 1-star reviews are actually really important in terms of showing transparency. And again, going back to how you respond to those reviews, as long as you respond to them positively in terms of, hey, either this customer, hey, you said this and this is what was what really happened. We'd love to make this right for you if we can. As long as you're showing that you're engaging with those reviews to make things right as a brand, whenever you can, or telling your side of the story, I believe that builds a significant amount of trust amongst your customer base that then will actually have even though it's a 1 or 2-star review, have a dramatically positive effect on the sentiment that your prospective customer has as they engage with you or have a desire to engage with your brand. So again, these are great things that partners can then wrap up in terms of strategic consulting with their customers and show them how they can do this in an automated fashion so that it's a brand benefit as opposed to a detractor to their brand and customer loyalty.
So this last one, big rock number 5, is really, we asked how they do this stuff, like how brands do these things, right? Do they manage them with their like centralized marketing team at corporate if they're a bigger business, or do they actually enable store managers to go and do this because they're closer to the customer and they can respond with more authenticity or be more authentic with the local brand and what that experience is like at that local level? And what we found overwhelmingly is that it's still pretty heavily, even when it comes to things like local social, which could definitely benefit from a local touch, still heavily managed by corporate. So what we thought was an interesting dialogue here to end on is just to kind of reflect on this and think through all the different things that you could manage more on a local level, and maybe where partners can add value in this whole equation. So Brian, do you want to talk a little about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of great things here, right, that could be focused on, and again, what's easiest to focus on in terms of where you can make the most value or generate the most value for the end customer as a partner, or if you're a brand, how can you generate more value and maintain that kind of concept of control, right? And so as you think about it, I think many of these things you think, okay, well, yeah, corporate should own that, or if you're a partner, this is a lot of value that I can drive for an end customer, right? If you go to the next slide, Alyssa, we can kind of see we've kind of segmented these into the scale, right? So local SEO, classic case of typically corporate would own that, or a partner would own that and help a smaller brand really optimize, right, the way that they think about local SEO, right? And then you think about local web pages and review response and even local social, right? These are things where if you're a partner, right, helping brands, you can help automate and you can provide best practices. If you're a brand, you probably want a little bit more control over those things. But then as you skew farther into items that are extremely localized, like local events or local traditional ads, that's where you really are going to need to rely on your local team, and candidly probably where they feel the most comfortable in terms of creating that collateral or content or strategy in terms of resonating with their local market.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting thing to think about, and where there's value add, and especially when it comes to smaller businesses, I feel like you were talking about earlier, the wearing multiple hats, there's a lot of room for value add here. It feels, yeah, cool. So that brings us to the end. We'll open it up to Q&A in a second here. I just want to say thanks again to Localogy for having us here. The benchmark report that we were sharing some data from today, again, hasn't come out yet. So first look for you guys. So thanks for joining and taking part. But we will get that report out, and I think it's coming out next week. So we'll make sure to get you guys a copy. And then we have our contact information here, our emails. We're happy to chat anytime. So feel free to drop us a line. And we'd love to answer any other questions you might have. And with that,
Okay.
I'll hand it over to Charles for Q&A.
Great, that was awesome. Thank you very much. So I'm going to open with a comment from an audience member. It's not really a question, but it's a comment on something that was said earlier. 1-star reviews, spot on. They are really important for transparency and services. Such review filtering affects the businesses badly, especially in the long run. That's just a comment. It's not really a question there. I don't know if you want to respond to that at all.
Completely agree, and thanks for the feedback. We're 100% aligned. It sounds like we've both seen the same things, and I love it.
Okay, great. So we have a handful of questions here, and if others, it's not too late to insert a question. Just type it into the questions box, and I will share it with our speakers. In lieu of more questions, I'll read the ones that we have already, so that have queued up during the course of the webinar. So referring back to the 5 stages, which was sort of the foundation of your report, so where do you see the most impact for customers? Is it in stage 4, stage 5? I don't know if it'd be helpful to put the 5 stages back up on the screen if they're handy. Yeah, this is what we're referring to. I'll read it again. So where do you see the most impact for customers? Does it come in stage 4, stage 5, or where, I guess I'm inferring that that's sort of the best return on effort, at what point is the biggest impact experienced for customers?
Yeah, I think it depends on the size of the business and where they're at, right? So if it's a smaller business, so you think of like SMB, right? The S in SMB, solopreneurs, single location, or maybe less than 5 locations that are probably in stage 1 or maybe stage 2. The biggest impact that you're going to be able to make for them as a partner is managing listings, right? Making that process seamless, automated, and consistent in terms of what they do. And then the local social pages and Google posts and review management, that's going to help them in terms of SEO and traffic. That's going to create additional revenue for them, which is going to be where the largest impact is. If you think about the M in SMB, those mid-sized businesses or even enterprise brands, it's really taking what they have, right, the managed local marketing that they've already kind of figured out, and localizing that, right, at scale, combining both the best practices of the brand consistency in terms of experience and putting some constraints around to make sure that you maintain that, and providing that flexibility in terms of, you think of like local SEO web pages, right? And, you know, online conversations and in-store digital, like these are all things that are going to matter and make the most impact in terms of driving additional sales and candidly SEO for larger brands. So I think, again, it depends a little bit in terms of the stage of the company, but I would say somewhere between stage 3 and stage 4, depending on whether it's the S in SMB or it's the M in SMB and enterprise as far as brands.
Yeah, I would add that, like, I was having a chat with a small business owner a few weeks ago. He sells handbags, and for him, you know, to compete with Amazon, local inventory is super important. So he has all his handbags online, locally categorized. He's really loving like the Google photo stuff that brings, so having all those photos of all the local inventory as well is really important to him. So that's a big one for him. So even for a small business, some of the things in stage 5 might be really important to give them an edge in the market. You know, it just depends on your industry a little bit, I would say, as well.
That's a great call out. And Amazon is so disruptive for small companies, like just radically disruptive. And that's a great way to level the playing field and really, as David, stand up to the Goliath in the industry, right?
Okay, we have another question that kind of plays off of the review comment earlier. Do you have any tactics or strategies for clients who have reviews that aren't published? I don't know if that's clear. I guess I infer from that, you know, how to convince companies to publish all of their reviews, or if they're not publishing all of them.
So I want to just make sure that I understood that.
I'll
correctly.
read the question verbatim again. Do you
Sure.
have any tactics or strategies for clients who have reviews that aren't published?
Yeah, I think it goes back to trust. You have to really lean into this concept of trust, and when they withhold reviews, what kind of message is that sending to their customers as far as them being able to trust the brand? Right?
I have a clarification if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
It's as in Google isn't publishing them, as they're not published by Google for some reason.
Okay. So the reviews
Different question entirely. Okay.
got it. So the reviews are being submitted, but they're not, for whatever reason, they're being
Correct. That's what I'm inferring. Yes.
Okay.
As in Google isn't publishing them is the addendum to the question.
Got it. Okay. This is where I'm going to very humbly put my Uberall hat on, right? I try to be very impartial during this whole thing because I respect the webinar process, right? And I've done a lot of these, and you don't ever want to get into this.
Thank you for that.
Promotion, right? But for this one, I'm going to put my Uberall hat on. We at Uberall have an extremely good relationship with Google, and we have one of the very few platinum certified local Google kind of certified people, right, that really understands Google reviews and Google listings and GBP, and like she's certified as one of very few in the world actually that's platinum certified. We typically rely on people like that on our team to have those direct conversations with Google to dive in deeper to say, hey, why is this happening and what can we do to resolve this, etc. And so if you don't have a partner that you can rely on to help you get to the bottom of those types of kind of one-off cases with some of these larger directories, you should, right? And I'm not saying that Uberall has to be your partner. If you have somebody you can rely on, great. But if you don't, you should find somebody that has that type of relationship that can really get the answers to those questions to make sure that your client's not boxed in terms of some sort of flag or something that Google has on the account that could potentially easily be remedied with a broader conversation with them.
How is Google with responsiveness to things like this? Assuming you're coming from a position of platinum partner as you are.
I can tell you that we've gotten them to create, maybe I shouldn't say this, but I'll say it anyway.
You're about to, just go ahead.
Yeah, we've gotten them to create categories for us specifically for our customers, right? In terms of GBP, right? Where categories didn't exist previously. So they have been very, very responsive to, us at Uberall. How responsive they are to their other partners, I can't say. I mean, I would assume that it's probably comparable, to be fair to Google, right? Although we have this platinum expert, and so we probably get a little bit more attention maybe than other providers, I would assume, right? Or other partners, I should say. But historically, they've been extremely responsive when we've had conversations with them about these types of things.
All right. Okay, so we got a couple more questions real quick. One is, you mentioned the whole idea of loyalty programs earlier and the importance of them for small businesses. Any thoughts on the easiest or most effective way for small businesses to launch a loyalty program? And what are some sort of, I guess the best way to summarize it, what are some of the things that most commonly get in the way of success in launching a loyalty program for a small business?
One of the things that I always lean on is coupon codes. Right. If you can issue a coupon code typically relatively easily, right? Or or a physical coupon, right? Or some sort of voucher, right? In terms of physical location. Being able to do that for your customers is relatively low-hanging fruit. It doesn't take a whole lot to do. I mean, my parents had a pizza restaurant for 20 years, a local pizza restaurant, single location, solopreneurs, and they used to issue out coupons. They actually had special stationery that they created, and they created a kind of ledger, so to speak, and it was nothing but an Excel file. And these coupon codes all had a variable alphanumeric character set at the bottom of the little coupon, and they would hand those out to their most valuable customers from time to time. Hey, here's $5 or $10 off your next pizza or whatever. But they would hand it to them whenever they would come into the store to pick an order up, right? Or if we were delivering it, we'd hand it to them and put it on their box. Not everybody would get one. It was an extremely simple loyalty program, but it was extremely effective, as those customers just really appreciate being recognized for the great impact that they had in my parents' business. And so that's one small example, but a relatively easy way to get started if you're a small business and wanting to do this. And then of course you can scale it out from there with like all sorts of other activities, but it's something simple that you can do.
Okay. I think we have time for one more here. So talk about creating content is important for all of this, everything that you're talking about, whether those are simple social posts, sharing images, whatever it is. What is the current status of small businesses' willingness and capability in terms of generating content for their business? And how do you help them overcome any sort of phobia around creating content?
Yeah, I think you have a couple of different camps in terms of small business owners. You have those that really lean into content and are excited by it, and they're creative, right? And they enjoy that. And those that do, the risk to them is they spend more of their time on those types of activities as opposed to other revenue generating activities in their business, right? So there's a little bit of dilution of focus that happens there, which is a risk to them, right? The other is those that want to, but they're afraid of adding their voice to the community in terms of posting because they might say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing or whatever, or they don't know what content they should post or things along those lines. That latter camp, having a preset library that they can utilize, that these businesses can utilize in terms of imagery, in terms of ideas around upcoming holidays and different snippets or thoughts that they could utilize in their local markets, is really key to helping them be involved in doing that. It's also, from a partner standpoint, a tremendous opportunity if part of your go-to-market strategy is do it for me. You can absolutely wrap a service around that as a company and provide that as a service to small businesses. And many of them, because it will save them time, will absolutely consume that as a service because, again, the most valuable resource that they have, because they wear so many hats, is time, right? And so there's a couple of different opportunities there.
Okay, it looks like we're about out of questions. So I think we could probably wrap it up there. Dara, do you want to take us out?
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Charles. And thank you so much, Brian and Alyssa and the Uberall team. Great questions, great discussions. We really appreciate you putting this webinar together for us. A few more items from Localogy before we end today's webinar. You will be able to view today's broadcast along with previous webinars on our website at localogy.com. Just navigate to research and resources and scroll to webinars. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please be sure to visit localogy.com and subscribe for updates to be the first to know about future webinars. Have a great day, everyone. Thank you so much.